my name is Eric Walker-Rawson, and this is Discussing New Approaches, the thought leadership series where we delve into anything strategy, data, tech, AI, and everything in between. So today we're doing a social science and ethics take on AI and data. And I'm joined by Martin Lukac, who is the founder and chief data scientist of AI startup Koios. Did you want to give yourself a bit of an intro to Koios and also your background before starting it up? I think that'd be really beneficial to everyone listening.
Sure, sounds good. So yeah, I come from social science background. I initially studied political science and international relations in my undergrad, and very early I became fascinated with statistics, mainly as a tool to provide some answers to scientific questions, right? And obviously, being a very nerdy kid that loved programming, always, I was overjoyed when I found out about this awesome thing called data science, right? So that's been great, and I wanted to learn more of it. But I realized that if I would take a full-time career, there'd be very little time for me left to actually study this in depth. So that's why I decided to go for a PhD. I also wanted to learn more about how you do research, which is not taught in applied masters. So I did a PhD in computational social science. I liked academia at the time very much. I spent one more year as a postdoc at the London School of Economics, teaching in their masters in data science and applied social data science degree. After that, I transitioned to private industry. I worked as a research data scientist at a company called Quantco, which provided a very good blend of learning and applied research and solving very hard problems. But early last year, I started a company called Koios with my co-founder, where we do personality prediction from voice. So we developed a new set of algorithms which allow us to predict someone's personality from just a very short snippet of their voice recording. And we use this in recruiting and learning and development, sales, and and a lot of other sectors for personalization. So to improve communication, collaboration, messaging, etc., etc.
Amazing. So just for anyone who is maybe unsure with these types of courses, how does the PhD that you completed differ from maybe a more standard analytics data science PhD?
Right. Mine was again a blend of social science plus the technical, but that I would say at that time especially was pretty unique when this was 2016 last year, where data science and computational social science was relatively new. It wasn't so much in the mainstream. It was getting its foothold and becoming the new hot thing. But at that time, that was very, very non-standard. I would say today the situation has drastically changed. Even on the undergraduate level, you can see a lot of new courses popping up. At the LSE, for example, there is this new set of courses in their undergrad they introduced. It's politics and data science, sociology and data science, and I find it absolutely amazing because I would love to do one of those. Like if they were available back then, I would totally do one of those because it's great that people get access to these amazing tools very early in their careers, and they can apply them and do very, very cool things within a year or two of their studies.
Amazing. So what inspired you to start Koios, just out of interest?
Right. I think it blends perfectly what my social science aspect, which is dealing with people, modeling people, trying to understand how people behave and why at a very deep level, with a technical aspect that is very challenging. So personality prediction has been a thing for quite some time now. It's been done from social media data, from text. Some people tried from pictures and images, which I think people should not do, from eye tracking movements, and a lot of cool stuff. But then we discovered this very, very small niche that has been omitted for such a long time, that is your voice. And when you read the older philosophical articles thinking about personality, there is this book from the 60s. It's one of the first things that people say, just listen to what and how the person speaks, and you'll learn a lot about their personality. And I think we were uniquely positioned to train a set of AI algorithms to do just that in a very nice and rigorous way.
Amazing. So what makes voice data maybe a bit different from sort of image and video by comparison?
Right. Image and video are a little bit dangerous from the ethics point of view. We can get into that a little bit later probably. Voice is really fantastic because it offers two signals for you, right? I mean, video does as well, but there is this danger. Voice gives you a signal in what people are saying, right? So you listen to them speaking about something, but also it's very important how they say that, right? I mean, that's what our moms used to tell us, right? I don't care what you said, but I didn't like how you said it. And that's basically it, right? If you can combine these two signals, you get a much richer signal and hence better prediction from your AI algorithm about someone's personality.
Definitely. I mean, when I started my career, I used to work on the grad side, and oddly enough, even though I'm working in very technical areas now, I actually started off in more soft skills areas like sales and recruitment and getting grads into those types of careers. So often we would talk about how can you come across over a phone interview or a video interview, which is very different to in person. And a little bit of theory behind that was always how you're coming across. It's not actually what you're saying. In a bit of communication theory, it's more body language takes up the biggest elements of how you come across. And then there's
Right.
the second largest percentage is actually how you're saying what you're saying. And the smallest percentage is actually what you say. So again, it's something that I think I can definitely see how it relates. But I suppose going into our first topic, so coming from a social science background that you've described now, so how has that influenced your approach to working with data and AI?
Right. I think in general, I'll speak a little bit more generally, but this applies very much to my experience. People with social science background have a slightly different mental model of the world when trying to model something, right? People from technical backgrounds are more used to these well-behaved problems, sometimes even toy examples that you can model stuff fairly nicely, and it makes sense. The big caveat of working and trying to model and predict people behaviors that people sometimes make absolutely no sense. The social world is extremely messy, extremely adaptive, deeply irrational in many respects, right? And so multidimensional that I think social scientists tend to recognize and sort of internalize this right off the bat due to their studies and being exposed to it quite a lot during their studies. I'm not saying that technical people or people with technical background don't do that. Of course, there are brilliant scientists with technical background working in economics and sociology, mostly physicists, mathematicians. I've had a chance to meet some of them, and I've been amazed how well can they frame and understand a social scientific problem. I think it's very, very refreshing. My favorite example here is when I don't remember which book this was, but it's been like a flashback, and you should think as you stand in a crowd of people, and there's this politician coming on stage, and this politician has an amazing rags to riches story, right? They've been homeless, they've been an artist in their youth, very much failing their whole life. They went to war for a couple of years of their life. They came back, built an amazing political party for trying advertising or talking about poverty and inequality, right? And you're like, yeah, that's what an amazing example, and you would applaud this person. But then there is this tiny twist, right? I mean, you would be applauding Adolf Hitler, right? And this is the social world, right? I mean, there is this tiny piece of information. If I presented just the first part, you have one reaction to the story. If I switch this, obviously we know you don't want to do that. And there is this huge cultural and historical connotation around that the social world tends to do, right? Atoms don't have such a tendency to change their opinions and behavior with such a tiny flip of information that is related to culture and history. So yeah, I think that's amazing. But one thing also, there's a flip side, right? I mean, there are a lot of people from social sciences who would love to go into tech, and they would love to work in these amazing tech companies, but a lot of them also have to do their homework in terms of the tech skills and upskilling. So exactly as all the people from STEM backgrounds cannot just come and make a meaningful contribution to social scientific literature, we as social scientists also have the obligation to actually learn the lingua franca of the tech world, which is the mathematics, statistics, have a very good grasp of at least one programming language and some software engineering, because otherwise you'd be really stifled in what you can do and how you can contribute in this environment.
No, I completely agree. It's do you think that barrier to more social sciences, people with social science backgrounds coming through, do you think that barrier is thin, or do you think there is quite a lot of work? Do you think the data industry and tech industry and AI industry would benefit from more social sciences coming through?
Oh, absolutely, and they would benefit big time. We'll talk about it more probably when we come to ethics. The barrier used to be much thicker, but now I'd argue with having so many great resources out there that are online, that are free in most cases, and having even tools like GPT to give you feedback on some of the things in almost instantaneously is just amazing. It basically is just a matter of whether you are willing to invest, willing and able, obviously. If you are from disadvantaged background and you are barely making the ends meet, we need to recognize that it is not a given that someone can spend 4 or 5 hours a day learning something as technical and complicated as mathematics, statistics, and computer programming. But I think in the Western world, majority of the social scientists from a good university have the chance to penetrate tech relatively easily because all the resources are at their disposal.
I suppose, do you think there is on the opposite side, is there a demand for social sciences in industry?
I think so. I think there's been maybe 2016, 2015 last year when Meta was, or back then Facebook was, one of the first companies to actually recognize the value of computational social scientists. And I have quite a lot of acquaintances who went there and did some amazing work. And it's been so refreshing because they previously been in academia with relatively constrained budgets in terms of the funding. And then suddenly they entered the company and they had full access to all their databases. And suddenly the universe of research they could have produced from one day to another was absolutely infinite. So I think the trend is only continuing. It's obvious for bigger companies that are in the generative AI space right now. OpenAI, Anthropic, Perplexity, Cohere, they all recruit also social scientists to study the social impact they are making, their models are making in societies. Economists trying to model what is happening in the society with the advent of this technology, but also in product roles. It's people using your product, so you being able to understand why they are doing this and not that, why they are so irrational very often, and why they are just not following the rules, is extremely useful for these companies. You have to find those positions. They are not advertised as like, this is social science position. No, those are technical positions, but you can have an edge if you have a background in social sciences and have the technical knowledge to pass their initial tests.
Definitely, and I'd say if anyone's listening who's considering that transition from social sciences into technical background, obviously you can do courses and you can upskill in that way, but also get a mentor, get a technical mentor who can develop you in that way. I think that would be again probably the most beneficial thing that you can do, sort of help get you into that industry. But I completely agree. I think you see the same thing in other technical areas like NLP, for example, where you have linguists who can work on sort of LLMs and other types of models. And although they don't come from a technical background, sometimes they'll be a part of those technical teams to be able to advise them on the linguistic capability of these LLMs, because there are things that the technical side just won't see. So I see there are other sciences being applied to sort of technology. So before we do move on, I'd love to ask you, what do you think the future might hold for that collaboration of social sciences and technology? Where do you see it going?
Oh, that's
a big question.
that is a big question. I would maybe answer, I would hope it would get stronger, the connection there. we need people looking into these technologies, especially due to the absolutely rapid pace of advancement of these technologies. And I don't think there is enough people trying to research and understand the implications of what has happened in the last 2 years. I think this is very similar to COVID, even though COVID was more pronounced with all the lockdowns, and we understand that it was a big thing when we were locked up at home, but this were more silent, and LLMs will take over quite a large chunks of the economy. At the same time, they will create immense value. At the same time, they'll pose huge threats when it comes to misinformation and our democracies, for example. So it is so multifaceted that I don't think there are enough people out there having appropriate budgets to research this. I think, I don't remember the exact number. Someone was comparing the budgets for social sciences researching the tools versus the tool development budget, and it was like 2 or 3 orders of magnitude lower, right? So it's billions now with potentially trillions if some Altman succeeds going into this, and it's literally peanuts for the social scientists trying to understand what this means for us as a society.
Yeah, and it almost sounds a little bit sinister, I think, but it underpins the importance of understanding the dangers of these technologies as they, like you said, as they sort of exponentially increase. I suppose this actually leads us on to our next question. So how, and I suppose this is from your experience with Koios as well, but how do you scale a data and AI product ethically?
Right. Yeah. I think let's split this into 2 pieces. Let's talk about the scale first, because I think that has changed drastically in the last few years, and then we can talk about ethics. So I was discussing with my co-founder and our engineer developing this, and we were just completely stuck with how do you plan for development in such an environment like this one, when every single week there is something new. This week, OpenAI released the text-to-video feature, right? We are all waiting. GPT-5, Gemini model just came out. New Llama 3 is probably coming out pretty soon. It's just insane pace, and you can just make very wild assumptions about where the world will be. And we used to do this on, where the world will be in a decade. Then a couple of years ago, we started doing that, where the world will be in a year. And now it's like, what do we expect next month? And you just go crazy, because it may happen, and it might change the whole industry very, very dramatically. So, and I think this also comes with very big changes in how venture capital is allocated to these companies. So a few years ago, I was just listening to an audiobook from the founder of Waze, fall in love with a problem, not with a solution. And it was amazing, because this been a decade ago or so when he was starting the company. And he said, we raised a couple of million pre-seed fund. And I literally started laughing, because that's a complete no-brainer today, unless you just come up with some LLM model, right? And the allocation of funds now, or historically, used to be, okay, we like the founder or the founding team, and we like the idea. Here's some money, go try it. The risk is there, right? Now, what venture capital funds usually expect is that you already have some audience. You already developed a product. So pre-seed funds are not anymore to build a product, to create something and test it out. The VC funds are now to scale up, right? So, and the reason why this is, and this is a hypothesis of mine, right, is that because it became so much easier to develop tools that can bring value very easily. Like literally, when we are trying to raise money at Koios, we were grilled like crazy about accuracy, about defensibility, data ownership, accuracy for different subgroups, etc. It's been absolute ordeal, but you don't need any of that to start a business today, right? You can just stitch together a couple of tools as a solopreneur, and then just put it out there and start producing value for people. And these people will likely pay you. I follow a couple of people on LinkedIn and Twitter, or X, and they are solopreneurs. They have 6 or 7 businesses where they make tens of thousands of pounds every month, basically just stitching together things that provide value. And I think it's, just to give you an example, a great example would be a recipe GPT, right? My problem, I have 2 kids, right? I come home, they're hungry, and I need to cook them dinner. I look in the fridge and I have no clue what to make them, right? And this is literally GPT-4. You just tell it what you have in the fridge, it will give you the recipe. I'll pay money for this. If there was a nice interface, I could just click or take a picture, right? And there is zero development that you have to pay for, right? And that is a great app, great value. You'd probably be able to scale it up. But there is also a flip side here. Many companies fell for this trap last year, or when the better models started coming out. And there's been this very big trend of talk to your data GPT, right? So you have some documents locally, you run some kind of an LLM model, you do the embedding, then you ask a question, it fetches the relevant pieces, puts it into the context window of the large language model, and it answers something smart, presumably, right? And people started developing this. It's been such a huge boom. But if you look at what's happened this year, this whole market has been completely erased by OpenAI releasing the assistant feature. So you can do that right there. You have NVIDIA doing this locally on their chips in your local PC, right? And there are some companies that do it on the whole internet. One is called Perplexity. They are the biggest competitor right now with Google, that allow you to search stuff on the internet using a similar approach and technology. So you have again these 2 worlds. One that has been immensely successful, almost zero development cost, can produce value, and the risk now becomes the defensibility of the tech that you have. Right? It's not anymore the founding team. Whether you find the product market fit is now whether you can defend this against the big players in the market and keep providing value and build the defensibility later in your journey.
Do you think that scale and how quickly you have to keep up with this market, with these big players, with these solo entrepreneurs that are developing things very quickly and pushing them out, do you think that increases the, I suppose, margin of error and the things you're creating because you have to move at such pace and such scale now?
Yeah, absolutely. And there are dangers connected to that. And I think, that's actually a great gateway to the ethics question, right? So we now have this environment that is moving so quickly, and people try to provide tools out there, and people might start consuming them, but what does it mean to be ethical in such an environment? And I suppose the answer is it depends, right? So there are a lot of principles of ethical, or how you develop ethical AI, but they matter differently depending on the product you're developing, right? So on the one hand, you have a little bit more general ones like fairness, for example, respect for people, inclusion, diversity, right? I think we all agree these are some general principles. But there are some that matter less for some applications. So for example, do I necessarily need my model to be explainable? It would be great, right? But in many cases, I don't necessarily need that. I don't need the transparency or maybe such a high accuracy, because depending on what you compare it to. So it is really complicated to say, or to actually evaluate what ethical means in general when it comes to AI. And I think that's one of the things that I wanted to mention, where social scientists and philosophers can actually add value, because you cannot have this one size fits all kind of solution for ethical AI. You have to actually dig deeper into how your product influences lives of people. What are the dangers? What are the potential implications of you releasing this model into the wild? And I think that was some of the thinking behind the EU AI Act, where they identified this high risk areas, for example, law enforcement, employment, welfare, migration, justice, right? So these are all areas where you have to really think very deeply about what your product does to the people. And one example I used to discuss with my students was, so imagine you have a social welfare program, right? And now you run an experiment and see that, amazing, that it seems to be beneficial in helping people, and in some aspect it does not really matter. But then you run the analysis a little bit more, and then you find that it actually helps some people substantially more than others, right? And now we are redistributing something that costs money. It's a scarce resource. So we have some kind of an economic obligation to maximize the social utility of this program, right? So then you start allocating this program to those people. Is that fair that you cut off the people that would not benefit as much, but it would have made a huge difference in their personal lives, right? So there is this one problem. And now like flip it on its head. Now you imagine you found that you are actively hurting people with this. Do you have a moral obligation to withdraw that? Yeah, I mean, it's a completely different conclusion you're reaching, right? So there you said, yeah, you probably should not, right, differentiate. And there, yeah, you shouldn't, like, you should not hurt people, right? It's a very different situation, right? So I think the ethics or the complexity that comes with thinking about ethics has to be really informed by the specific use case. And that's why I really value some of the voices out there who really dig very deeply into understanding the implications of AI. So one of them is Katie Crawford. She wrote a book, Atlas of AI. Amazing work. She was looking into the power dynamics, how we obtain data, right? So majority of the AI applications today are built on data that's been crowdsourced with not very fair wages, exploiting the difference in wages between the third world and the Western countries, right? It would have cost us much more to have these tools had we sourced the data from the Western world, or had we paid them a fair wage. So it's very complex, and unfortunately, I don't think anyone has all the answers, and this requires very deep research if you want to do it right.
No, I completely agree. I think it's, again, relating to your point earlier, I suppose, if that hopefully more social scientists can enter this field and provide more research, because that's the only way that we can even approach things like regulation or putting in standard practices for ethical considerations. I mean, I suppose it's the same argument as, when you go and buy a top or a shoe, where has that been made? If you're buying it from a big brand,
Yeah.
what are the ethical considerations there? And although I think data and AI suffers from it being almost a sort of intangible element. You can't see it; it's not physical. Therefore, you can't directly see the ethical implications that you might be able to in the example that I just gave. But they are still there, and they still need to be considered.
That's a great example. Yeah, we have the source country on our fruits in our local stores, right? But we don't know where the data came from that we trained our algorithms on.
So perhaps a bit more train of thought or trail of information as to where that data comes from. So more accountability, I suppose, is probably some form of answer. But I think that's really interesting. I'd love to hear the sort of audience's thoughts on that thought problem that you raised. So I suppose when you're approaching Koios, how do you, or how can organizations balancing something like leveraging people analytics for productivity and also respecting employee privacy or sort of potential bias that might come up from those?
Right. Yeah, I think the word here, the very important one, is respect for the end user. I think you can just solve a lot of these issues with just being transparent about what you're doing exactly with their data, what is going to happen, what does this mean for them, and also build in good user interface and user experience so that they can opt out, for example, in case they don't feel like they want to be analyzed. Or so one thing that we're very cautious of is some people might not want to publicize their voice through and send it to the model. So we, for example, have an option to run through a questionnaire. So if you feel like you'd be disadvantaged by doing this, or you have any other problem, you can do the questionnaire and there is no disadvantage for you whatsoever. The accuracy is exactly the same. The whole experience of the product stay the same. So I think it's these small things that companies can do, bearing in mind that the most important thing is to respect the user of your platforms. The question about balance between leveraging sort of some kind of a people analytics and respecting their privacy, I think we can look back into the history in end of the 19th century, where there's been this huge boom of Taylorism and scientific management, where people figured out if we start measuring people and their productivity in some ways, we can indeed bring some productivity gains to the table. But with new technology and new possibility to measure people better and more accurately and faster, some companies have brought this to an absolute extreme. For example, in some warehouses, they were timing people's toilet visits, right? And then they would fire them if they took too many, right? Some of the companies have trained algorithms to select or recruit people based on their existing workforce. There's been obviously tech company doing that. So it's been mostly white men with computer science degrees. So those were all the ones in their data set, those successful cases, and everyone else was a zero. So everyone who didn't go through the process was a zero. So they built a perfect classifier for white males, right? You cannot blame the model. The model is doing exactly what you asked it to do. It optimized on this difference, right? It doesn't mean that in the end, if you use this model, you would get any benefit. You would actually hurt your company by using this. So I think it's been taken to an extreme, and now I think companies becoming more aware of this. A lot of this has been talked about in the book by Cathy O'Neill, Weapons of Mass Destruction, which is an amazing book.
I love it.
I think now being more, it's very good. Many companies now start realize that they have to put barriers and maybe some safeguards in their products, right? So very, very small example, OpenAI is trying to do a lot of red teaming, or all the big companies do a lot of red teaming on their model. So you cannot ask it how to build a bomb, for example. It was like, I'm not telling you. It knows, it just won't tell you, right? So it's these minor tweaks which are important. And one thing in specifically for Koios, I think we know that if you personalize your communication to someone's personality, right, you can get huge benefits in understanding the other person better, in getting a better connection with them, building a better relationship and faster. An example, you don't talk to your 3-year-old the same way you talk to your boss, right? You don't have to have such a drastic difference, but there are some people that you want to communicate in some way, and others that you communicate differently, and they would like that. They would hear the message better. They would relate to what you're saying, and not be distracted by the mode of communication or how you said it, right? So these minor things, but then also on this other side, you have political manipulation, right? Cambridge Analytica used to exploit some of these things in a way that led to a very, very negative outcome. So you have to make sure that you try to safeguard against these uses, and then you monitor, you build checks, you build barriers. You would not allow them to generate the analysis or content that would potentially or could be potentially used in this way. So yeah, maybe one more example from the personality space, since it's very close to my heart. There has been this huge discussion about, and we know from research that some personalities actually match some occupations better, right? We've seen that if you are very extroverted, you would probably be a great seller, right? Because you love talking to people, you really thrive in that. If you're more introverted, you would actually enjoy a little bit calmer occupation, somewhere where you can, spend some time on your own, be, thinking about stuff. So it's a very different environment. And now, should you disqualify people based on their personality in obtaining that job? Absolutely no. That is an absolute no. Should you personalize how you deal with these people, how you let them thrive, how you let them grow, and how you manage these people? That's a great yes, right? There might be a very introverted person who would love to become a seller for whatever reason. That's not for me to judge, right? I'm there to help them become the seller by informing their manager how to manage them, how to motivate them, and how to help them thrive in that role.
Definitely, and also how they interact with the rest of the team, I'd imagine as well, how they fit within that team dynamic and the company dynamic. And I can relate to that, being an introvert in a sales-focused industry. You see a lot of extroverted individuals that are the majority, but there are other reasons as to why, especially if you get into the nuanced elements of it, I suppose, as to why I suppose the non-conformist or the non-typical individuals might like certain industries as well. But I
Right.
suppose just sort of summing up the whole conversation, if there are company leaders listening to this podcast, or maybe even people looking to scale up companies, or VCs or PE companies looking to invest, who should they invest in? What would be your, a snippet of advice you would give to companies looking to go into sort of people analytics, go into sort of AI and scale it at pace? What would be your, couple of words of wisdom for them?
Right.
Making you think on your feet there a little bit.
I like that. That's good. Um, Probably just go beyond the hype. I think it seems like there is a huge tsunami is now coming, right? And like we are drowning, but there will be again some equilibrium that we'll reach, and as a leader, you have to plan for that, not just for the wave that will come now. It will be extremely chaotic for a couple of years for sure, but I think going back to the basics and building a resilient, stable company that has healthy books, that is not going into too much debt, that provides robust value for its customers and its users. I think that is the bottom line, and those will be the companies that we'll see win in the next 10 to 15 years.
Amazing. And it's that long-term thinking that I definitely resonate with as well. So I think that's a great place to end it. So thank you very much, Martin, for coming on and having a conversation about this topic. Really, really interesting. I think hopefully it's very interesting for anyone listening as well. And we'll be
Thank
really
you
keen
for
to have you
having
on.
me.
Not a problem at all. We'll be really keen to have you on at another point. But we'll have more episodes upcoming soon. And everyone listening, go and check out Koios as well. They're doing some really interesting work. So go and check them out on LinkedIn and wherever else they can see you. If you want to give a quick sort of plug now to where they can catch you.
We'll post it in the comments. It's getkoios.ai, getkoios.ai.
Perfect. Thanks, Martin.
Thanks a lot.